I am Kirti Tiwari, Professor of English, presenting a lecture on feminism. The mark of any civilized society is that it gives liberty and equality to all its members. However, half of our race, that is women, have always been denied of their rights in all societies of the world. Hence, intellectuals and sensitive people, as well as wise men, are always concerned about their position. Feminism is a critical theory that has emerged against this backdrop. At the outset, let us first understand the term itself. Actually, it is difficult to define what is feminism because there are so many strands of feminism that have extended in different directions, and sometimes they are quite opposite to each other. So, what can be done? We can try to discuss some common characteristics of all. All feminisms are concerned with women's inferior position in society and how they are discriminated because of their sex. This is common in all. The honest intention of feminists is to draw the attention of others to bring about socio-economic and cultural changes in the present society so that there is no discrimination against women and inequality which has to be overcome. To start with, let us see what some of the dictionaries describe feminism as. According to Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary, feminism is a belief in the principle that women should have the same rights and opportunities as men. God has made us all equal, but gradually there has been marked discrimination between male and female. Cambridge International Dictionary states that feminism is the belief that women should be allowed the same rights, power, and chances as men and be treated in the same way or the set of activities that are intended to achieve this state. So, this is the dictionary's definition of feminism. If we go back to the word itself, it is a compound which is derived from Latin femina, which means women, and ism, which means doctrine. This word has entered English through French feminism. The term was coined by Charles Fourier in 1837, and in the beginning it meant only the feminine qualities. That is why Friedman observes, in medical terminology, feminism was used to signify a feminization of men. In political terms, it was first used to describe virilization of women. So, in this way, this term was not used the way we are using at present. It was first used for the feminization of men and in which they developed some feminine qualities. Right. Later on, it got associated with women's rights in 1890. Still, it is a very complex concept. Let us see what Wilfred L. Green says about feminism. He observes feminism has often focused upon what is absent rather than what is present, reflecting concern with the silencing and marginalization of women in patriarchal culture, a culture organized in favor of men. Unlike the other approaches, feminism is an overtly political approach and can attack other approaches for their false assumptions and about women. So here it is quite clear that it has been this movement started in opposing patriarchal culture, patriarchal in which there is a domination of man. So it is difficult to define feminism. So instead of going to a literal definition of feminism, it can be understood by tracing its origin and development. So let us have a quick glance over its growth. We have so far made it clear that it is a woman-centered, just as eco-criticism is earth-centered approach. This is a woman-centered approach towards the problems and also interpreting any work and so on. And it has emerged as a reaction against the patriarchal system. So what is the reason behind this? How it all started? In the new version of Bible, in Genesis, we have a description of how woman was born. Here it is. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. When he brought it to the man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." So it was man who gave the word woman because she was born out of his rib and flesh. And that is why it is said in Genesis that a man leaves his father and mother and is united with his wife, and they become one flesh. So this is the first instance in which we say in the Western culture how man is, you can say, more dominant than woman, because woman is actually a part of man. Then if we glance over a number of philosophies of the world, Western and Eastern, we see that there is a domination of male in every approach. Buddhists regarded female as obstacles in the development of man. Judaism also does not give equal status to women. Even the numerical symbolism of Pythagoras gives secondary place to woman. Number 1 stood for God, head, who is a male, whereas the second number represented femaleness and divisiveness. The Quran also emphasized superiority of men over women. Although they recommend there has to be modesty for both, but women were asked to hide their charms, not men. So a discrimination was there in Quran also. Then if we come to the western part, in Greek mythology, father is considered the parent of a child, not his mother. And then there are a number of beliefs and disbeliefs associated with sexes. To quote a man like Aristotle, he says the biological inferiority of woman makes her inferior also in her capacities, her ability to reason, and therefore to take decisions. Because man is superior and woman inferior, he is born to rule and she is born to be ruled. The courage of man is shown in commanding, of a woman in obeying. So this is quite amazing. A classical civilization like Greek and a philosopher like Aristotle believing in inferiority of woman and superiority of man. Then it was also believed that boys are good at mathematics and girls are good at languages. Maths are not, which is a difficult subject, not meant for women. In Parsi community, Zoroastrianism also imposed restrictions on the movements of women. Indian scenario is a bit encouraging because right in the beginning, in the Vedic period, equal status was given to men and women. Remember, no puja can be performed by a man without the company of woman. And they were quite wise and intelligent also. Conversations, spiritual debates were done. They participated in the religious debates. You can find a number of such conversations in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Then we have strong female characters like Sita, Shakuntala, Draupadi. Though they suffered male domination, but they were not passive or submissive or docile. They had their own identity and showed their own power from time to time, even independent decision. But in Indian concept, it was believed that woman was not only equal but also indispensable for men. To quote, Karyeshu mantri karuneshu dasi, rupecha lakshmi shama dhatri, bhojeshu mata shayantu rambha, shatakarma yukta kuladharma patni. In this way, a woman, a wife, plays multiple roles of a counselor, of a dasi or a slave, then of goddess of beauty, Lakshmi, then she is also incarnation of Shama, and then she can play the role of Rambha or beautiful temptress at night. So in this way, she has all the capacities. But then came Manusmriti, and Manusmriti states, day and night women must be kept in dependence by the males of the family. So here again there was a marked discrimination. Women needed the support of male. They ought to be dependent on men. And then it strictly says, even though the husband be destitute of virtue and seeks pleasure elsewhere, he must be worshipped as God, Pati Parameshwar. And later on, in the medieval age, women suffered the most. They were confined to home because of all kinds of invaders and rulers. They were exploited by the rulers, landlords, and other invaders who saw them as objects of lust, and therefore came customs like parda, sati, and johar, so that they can escape exploiters. As far as feminism in India is concerned, although women were conscious of their rights and duties and they had self-respect, I told you about Sita and Draupadi and others, and women were affected by what was going on around the world, awareness about their own sex and their own importance. But the term itself was not used, though they started women's movement in India. In the beginning, more and more women took part in freedom struggle and addressed the issues regarding women through politics or activism in different fields, and they also worked at individual level. So in this way we see that feminism has its roots in culture and society which was governed by men, patriarchal. And the negative side of this kind of society was that it was meant to suit the purposes of men without giving any respect to happiness and desires and needs of women. So though it originated in West, struggle for women's rights took movement in the last decade of the 18th century. It spread all over the world. Here we have some important publications and movements right from the beginning, which are visible in the titles itself. Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, Margaret Fuller's Woman in the 19th Century, Stuart Mill's The Subjugation of Women in 1869, women's suffrage movements in Britain around 1840, American Declaration of Independence, and then in the 20th century Rebecca West and Virginia Woolf discussed women writers' problems and made critical assessment of patriarchal society. So this is in short a brief introduction to feminism. This is the first part of my lecture on feminism. In the second part, we will try to discuss modern feminism.